You're all set?
Thank you. Good morning. I'll call to order the Thursday, February 20 meeting of the Facilities and Infrastructure Committee. And joining us this morning are legislators Susan Currie, Randy Brown, Mike Lane, and myself. And we expect legislator Mezey to join us here shortly. Are there changes to the agenda? I've got two resolutions that we'll want to add. IDs number 13118 and 13114. One of them is authorization to accept New York State Department of Environmental Conservation 2024 zero emissions grant and budget transfer for Ithaca Tompkins Transportation Council. If that's
The second one is at the bottom of the agenda for the no discussion included. It won't be a resolution to be voted on.
okay. Anything else?
You just got it.
Is there anything else that we had? Okay. Are there any public comments this morning? Seeing none, we'll move along. Minutes of January 16th, 2025. Everybody have a chance to review? Moved by Mike to approve, second by Susan. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Minutes are approved. We have advisory board appointments in front of us. Somewheres. Thank you. To the Air Service Board, Greg Mezey, legislator, for a term that expires December 31st, 2027. We need approval for that. Moved by Mike, second by Susan. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you, Susan. Chair's report. I think we got quite a few items on the agenda this morning, and we did ask that there be a discussion on departmental goals, and Corsa may be joining us here remotely, or I don't know if Norma's prepared for that one.
So the goals have been included in the agenda packet, and really the departments have been very busy over the last year, and I'm just going to leave it to you folks if you have questions about them to ask the departments that are here.
Okay. Could we ask the department heads as we go through their monthly reports to maybe highlight the goals that they
That's a good idea, yeah.
would like?
They know them best. So
Okay.
Otherwise, we have no other reports from county administration.
Very good. Thanks, Norma.
You're welcome.
And welcome back.
Thank you.
Highway Department. Jeff. Guess we had a couple things we wanted to talk to you about. One was road salt availability. Is that a topic right now?
It is. It's a growing topic. Luckily, we aren't too greatly affected by it at this time. I did bring Nick. He's the resident professional in the subject to give a little discussion and answer any questions you might have on it. Overall, it is a growing concern having to do with an OGS bid across the state, but at this time we are not too affected by it. I'll let Nick.
Yeah, currently we're seeing, we order at the beginning of the week, and by the end of the week we have our order at most times. I did just order today, so we'll see what happens with this next one, but we've been getting it pretty readily available.
Is yours coming in on the state bid?
Yes.
So it's coming out of American or?
Cargill.
Oh, it is out of Cargill.
Yep. Cargill was the low for our county at 52.45, and American is the only other one that bids in our county, and they were at 68.43 on the last contract.
And they had a state contract, right?
Yeah, these are all through OGS state. And there is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's six companies this year that bid on salt for OGS, but some of them aren't you know, anywhere near us, so they don't even put in a bid.
Randy?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think Brittany's husband works at Cargill, and he said they added a shift. I think they weren't operating at Cargill on Fridays, but now they are because the demand is going up, and I imagine they'll probably, if the demand keeps going up, the weather stays the way it is, salt's going to continue to be used. I want to thank you guys for what you're doing to the roads, because they really are well-maintained, and you've had like an inch of snow, like inch of snow. It's one of those things where you just have to keep on applying the salt, and we're very lucky to have a salt supplier pretty close. Do they transport to you, or are you picking up the salt yourself?
They deliver it to us. Those are delivered prices.
Which obviously helps a lot. It's a lot closer than somebody else, right?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we're one of the lower ones for numbers in the state, because we're so close.
Right.
And obviously, that's why American was at $68, because they're, you know, it's a bit of a haul from their mine. But the rumor that we're hearing is that they did go on a third shift up there trying to fill in, and Cargill is backfilling some of American Rock Salt's demand because they can't keep up, is the story of what's going on. So I'm sure that's going to slow them up a little, but they're kind of filling in that blank from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I know a lot of local stores have been out of bag salt because Cargill isn't bagging salt anymore locally. So I know that's been an issue for a lot of people. But.
For sure.
Lee? Mike?
Yeah, it's cold this week. It's going to warm up, and then it's going to get cold again, according to the weather report. So early March is going to be another hit from the polar vortex, they're saying. Yeah, there is shortages out there. I've read that Buffalo was having a big shortage, and they're having to try to get out of the contract because the supplier isn't able to meet it, the state contract or whatever contract they have. And so they're trying to be able to go to Canada to get salt. But I wondered, have we thought of doing our own county bid for salt? I know it's, sometimes we do that, and sometimes the towns and villages actually do their own rather than buying off state contract.
We actually tried that. I don't remember if it was last year or the year before in our annual material and services bid. And we talked to the towns and we put it in our bid, and it actually came back. It was $6 or $8 higher than OGS. So we ended up going with Cargill. We had to send a letter asking for acceptance. Cargill accepted us, let us into that state contract, and we ended up going with the OGS because it was cheaper.
And that makes sense, but I'm just wondering if there's a shortage, if it makes sense to have a backup contract that we could go somewhere else if we needed to.
I believe the state does have, in the OGS, there is some emergency backups in there, I believe. And that's part of the what some people, I believe, are buying it through now to get away from American Rock Salt and try to go somewhere else because they can't get it. And
one more question, if I may. Did we have a full salt storage building when the winter started?
We were probably half full, I would say.
Half full.
Yeah, it's kind of a toss-up looking at your budget, the way it works, because we have to pre-order this in the spring, not knowing how much it costs. So we have to put in our order to the state. Generally, we do 7,000 tons is our base order. This year, we decided to cut it back to 6 because we did have some salt left over. So you put that in, and it's May, I believe, and we don't find out the results until usually in September. So you budget for something that you don't know how much it costs, and then in September, they tell you, oh, here's your award. And it works funny with that, you know, that contract doesn't match our budget year. So a lot of times we'll go into fall and we'll look at, you know, how much do we have left in our snow and ice budget, and then we'll purchase salt on kind of last year's money, purchasing it towards the next winter. So if we have money left in the fall, we look at that and order some salt, and it comes off of the new contract. So, because they don't match. So it's kind of a shell game of how much salt do you put in the barn versus the price of it and, you know, how much you have left. So far, we've been pretty successful.
I'm sure it's no exact science here.
No, there's a lot of variables for sure.
A long time ago, when I first came on the facilities committee, we had a real light winter, and we had a lot of salt, and we hadn't expended the budget. And I said, well, let's put it in a reserve account. And boy, did I get pushback on that idea. No, we want to use the money and buy more asphalt. But sometimes having money in reserve in these situations where you don't know what to buy makes some sense.
Mike, I can't believe there'd be any pushback here at this body. I was late this morning coming in because I was grilling our village highway crew on their salt situation over coffee, and they've been able to maintain it and actually got a load yesterday, so they're doing all right. Nick, thanks for coming down and briefing us on that. Jeff, other than a capital payment summary report for information, do you have anything for an update?
No, I do not. I was able to bring up the goals for the highway. So I can go through them, kind of read them off if there's any comments or questions to build upon the thought process behind them. Our number one goal, and this is just something we all really strongly believe in, to recruit, train, and retrain a diverse workforce. Continue to work with HR recruiter. They've been very key to a lot of our success in being able to fill open positions, focusing on outreach and social media, things like that. I feel like, and this is a lot of credit to Nick, continued work in our supervisors presently to maintain a positive workplace culture, climate. We do a lot of trainings. We have close contact face-to-face with all staff, open door policy, and we continue with our performance assessments on an annual basis. Opens the door to a lot of really good conversations and anything that may be going on personally with individuals. We do and have since 2015 still to this day, and continue working on what we consider and call a commercial driver's license academy. We offer training and practice to our seasonal cadre of employees to obtain a CDL while keeping with compliance with new federal commercial driver license requirements. Going to continue with our capital project programs. Presently, we're working on multiple ones there. The Podunk Road Bridge, the Fall Creek Road Bridge, which is the triple box, and the Falls Road Bridge, which was a new grant that we were starting to progress. That's kind of mostly on our technical engineer side. Those are most of our goals, although there's always something coming around the corner, and we continue to be challenged in a lot of different ways, but that's what we're working on.
Thanks, Jeff. I don't know if there's any questions. I've got one for you. I appreciate the information coming from your office regarding the West Cortlandt Street Bridge.
Yeah.
I think we touched on that last month, that the bids come in extremely high.
Yeah.
And where do you think you'll go on that?
What our last conversation is kind of considering an idea of a rehab, trying to look at the components of the bridge that do feel like we have some useful life in them, and then look at the ones that need attention. It's very unfortunate to not progress the project. I feel like it was a really nice bidding group. You've heard me say it many times before, that every price and every cost allocation and capital project number that we have up until bidding is an estimate, and that was an estimate. And then unfortunately, and sometimes it's in our favor, but also unfortunately, bids do exceed beyond that. In this case, it was a large number, but I do feel that because of the 4 bidders and the proximity of all those bids, that it was a good number. And I say it's an estimate. Now we know what the cost is, and in real world and what's going on, how to build something, I feel like that was a good number, one that I would, feel strongly would have worked. We just didn't have enough funding at the time.
Was that a Bridge, New York?
No, it's not.
That
It's
is entirely
100%
county
locally
capital.
funded. Yeah.
100%.
We did apply multiple times. It's not a good candidate for various reasons, and not to say it's not a good bridge for Bridge New York money. It's really the formula that Bridge New York grant uses for, the scoring of bridges, and for whatever reason, multiple reasons, it just doesn't score very high. There may or may not be. We hope that there's another round of Bridge New York coming out. It was a 5-year program. This last round with Falls Road, they actually lumped the first year, then they lumped the second and third year, and they lumped the 4th and 5th year. So all of the cash or the funds allocated to Bridge New York grant are depleted, or allocated, I should say, and coming up in new projects. So the 5-year program is now expired, and we're hoping that Albany will look at that and renew that program in some way. That's one of our advocacy goals going into this budget season in Albany. The rehab is an idea. We haven't really got with, what we need to do is kind of finalize the project and pay everything, all the design, everything costs, make sure all that's good, do like an audit, and then realizing there's funds available, look at what's available, and then partner that with discussions with our consultant to see what they feel. There may not be anything there worth, it could be yes and no, and I really don't know the answer to that, but that's the direction we're heading in as far as trying to buy time to, if you do a rehab, you're not doing a light rehab, you're doing something you're going to substantially get 20 years out of this work. If you don't want to put, to make sense, it has to be for a longer period of time, what the fixes would be. And if that's the case, I'll come back to F&I and we'll update that plan, and estimates we're kind of restarting even if we're doing a rehab. So I'll kind of stay posted, but that's probably the best direction to head in at this point.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
Randy?
Yeah, Jeff, the Podunk Bridge has been a project for some time. Is that actually you're gonna break ground this year on that one, or is that next year?
The Podunk Bridge was caught up in Cultural Resources, Section 106, I think, because it's historic. And it's been painfully slow going through that process. You've seen Freeze Road, which was also stuck in that process for, we're hoping Podunk Road doesn't reflect that same thing. But it is progressing. We have, monthly, weekly emails back and forth between our consultant and DOT, and checking on, where are we at, and, keeping them moving along. But we're really stuck in that phase. It's a very difficult phase to get through with DOT. We had, to get into it a little bit, it's coming to mind some of the frustration that we endure with this process. We had Ulysses was fine with storing the bridge. That is something we've done multiple times around the county. Mike, you're aware of bridges we've stored in Dryden, come with a useful life in some future, a snowmobile club or a rec park or something could use this bridge, but we don't necessarily have a direct use for it now, and that for years was an okay solution to moving forward with bridge projects, and now that's not acceptable. We had Ulysses willing to take the bridge, store it in their yard, and then this was literally like 2 years ago that they shot that option down, and so we've been part of it is trying to market it, sell it, nationwide, all the same things that Dryden had to go through. It gets really involving. I see it as two things. Like, yeah, you want historic preservation, so we're addressing that solution by storing it. We're not dismantling it. We're not cutting it into little pieces going to the scrapyard. It's sitting there so that now they can run. That can sit there, and if they wanted us to continue work on that, but it's not stopping the project, we could be progressing with the project. That's something I would very much favor. But because we have, you have to have all the answers and you have to go through this full process before you go to the next phase, we're really just working through that process. It's painful.
I'm surprised that's a historic bridge. It's a metal grate bridge, right? Or is it because of the way it was made, or?
It's a truss bridge.
Right.
It isn't, I could share a lot of opinions on that too. But their, definition of historical is different than what I think. You could still produce that bridge today if it was marketable and needed. You could still do that. They still do make truss bridges, where it makes sense in places. So there's nothing, that's not Freeze Road. There are different designs of truss bridges. There's a bow tie in the town of Newfield that the county, that's a very historic nature of construction that you don't do anymore. And quite honestly, you still could, but you just choose not to. This one isn't that old, so I feel a little differently. But with that said, it's been determined historic. It's on the register, and you have to go through that process. That's how it was okay when they let you have the solution of just storing it, right, and then you could move forward with a new bridge. But now it's not so easy. So it's gotten gotten more difficult to get through that process.
Well, good luck with that. I get to the highway department a couple times a month, and I see Terry's here as well. And I noticed the canopy there for the solar canopy had snow plowed around it, so I assumed that it wasn't being used a lot. So are you using the canopy, solar canopy there? Maybe I was just, the day I was there, I was only there a couple days a week. So.
Oh, the one in our parking lot.
Yeah.
It's a solar electric car charging solar, right? I don't think of it as a canopy, sorry. We don't use it. None of our vehicles, because we have chargers that are in our yard. So Terry might be aware of the use or maybe have some data. I'm not aware. I haven't seen anyone using it, but I don't know. I'm not really paying attention to it either. So okay. I'm not a good one to ask on that.
As long as Terry's moved up here to the table.
I can give a quick answer. So we're currently having some issues with that particular unit. So they're sending a person to come and service it. So it's having some difficulties right now, but luckily it's covered by warranty. But it is used by facilities, actually. They have one of their vehicles that charges there when it's usually available. Hopefully it'll be back online soon.
Okay, I was just curious. Thanks.
I think Mike had a question there. Thanks,
yeah,
Terry.
A couple of comments. Certainly about the bridges. In Dryden, there's the footbridge that Dryden Town wants to put across Route 13 for the trail. And there's Freeze Road, of course. And the latest word out of the town is that the cost of the footbridge is now come up about $700,000, which would have to come out of not out of the grant funding, which is maximized, but out of town money. So they're looking at that. And they're worried about the cost of Freeze Road going up because cost of steel and everything, who knows what the tariffs are going to do. So those are, it's been what, how many years on Freeze Road now? At least 4, hasn't it? Longer than that, 6?
Because I used to use that.
It was in the first round of Bridge New York, like 2017.
But I would just say, what happened with Red Mill, were you here when we had Red Mill? Okay, so you remember that we tried our best to get the federal funding on that, or state funding, I forgot which it was, but SHPO was in the way, and all the solutions we had, they wouldn't go along with, so we basically ended up giving back the money and eventually building it Yeah, you were there when we built it ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have the historic preservation issue anymore. And it was sad because we had some good thoughts about that old bridge, but sometimes they fall over themselves with some of the regulations that don't really help. That was one of the things. Can I talk about something else?
Please.
Just, which I think is kind of fun. You may have seen, and you guys are probably aware of this, around the country, around New York State, they've been running contests in their highway departments for people to name the snowplows.
Yeah.
And they've come up with some of the most innovative, fun kind of names for the snowplows. And I just wondered if you guys had ever thought about something like that. There's a serious component to it, and it brings people's attention to these trucks that are on the road in the terrible weather and trying to improve safety for people and makes them more aware of the trucks and things like that. So I just wondered if you'd had any thoughts about something like that. I think it might be fun to run a contest and ask people if they'd like to name our snowplows.
Yeah, Mike, it's really funny that you're bringing that up. Matt Wood from Dryden, one of our heavy equipment operators, caught a story similar, sent it to me, and I said, that's great. I have heard about it a little bit over the years, but it seems like it's kind of renewing.
I think out
and
of
the
Albany
article was
somewhere.
great. And I kind of empowered Matt to say, you want to, we'll support it, but look into this. And so he's very interested, and he's coming back around. He's kind of formulating some plans, I believe. But in the process, Jessica from Dewar sent me a big article, another one which I forwarded on to Matt for him to look at and draw ideas from. And you run, there's some little bit to it. You run a contest and you work with like elementary schools to try and come up with it, and you have some form of prizes. And so there's a little bit of we got to get through some things, but it's on our radar.
That's fun. Thank you.
And it's funny that you brought it up.
Well, thanks, Jeff.
All right.
Appreciate it. We'll
Thank you.
keep moving along here. Airport, Josh is on with us, I see. Have you got an update for us today?
Yeah, Rock sent me one up. She took a pretty good spill this morning, so she's a little under the weather, so. Let's see. Airport update, we're still working on the RFSRE building, working with the FAA, CNS, and the county admin to keep the project moving forward. Been a project on the capital improvement program. We started this project, I believe, in 2017 or 18 when the FAA funded a feasibility study after a write-up. So we've had to push it off a couple times, of course, with finances and stuff like that through COVID and everything that happened there. So still working on that. Emplanements from last year are up 12% from 2023 and 22% over 2022 numbers. So again, that's positive for us, moving in the right direction. United flights will be switching from Newark to Dulles. That starts on March 30th. It'll initially start with 2 flights, and then August timeframe, there'll be a 3rd flight that comes in midday, which will be good. And we are still working with our other airline partners to hopefully increase flights daily. So it's a challenge with the airlines. They're looking at all kinds of financial stuff, and so we're just going to keep talking with them and try to make them understand why coming to Ithaca is important. We got the new cafe started, Second Landing Cafe. They've began with their service ramping up, and they should be cooking here on the Shakir side within the next week or so. So providing our passengers with coffee and food for breakfast and lunch. Roxanne, myself, and Jeremy will be attending Northeast chapter. It's a managers conference in Hershey. Actually, I was tasked from the FAA to do a presentation on 139 inspections for what they call small hubs. So I'll be putting a presentation or wrapping that up here in the next couple days, a 45-minute presentation that I'll be speaking on the FAA's behalf. But because of the stuff that we've been doing the last decade in Ithaca, they recognize that we're doing the right thing here. So pretty good for us. Puts our name out there a little bit. So that's what she sent me.
Okay.
Any questions on any of that?
Thanks, Josh. Randy's got a question for you.
Yeah, Josh, I heard that the plane that rolled over in Toronto was actually in Ithaca some days earlier, so training is obviously very relevant for what you do up there. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I heard. And also, it's my understanding that the flights to Newark, we're going to lose 2 flights, and they're just going to transfer flights to, so we're not going to be gaining any additional flights. Is that correct? Or?
That's correct, right? So they're making a hub move, which is actually a good time because Newark is going under construction this summer. So there's going to be a lot of smaller hubs that are flying into Newark that would have lost service altogether. So instead of us losing service, we would be moving back to Dulles, which one has better connectivity. It also takes that aircraft out of the East Coast realm where, if storms are affecting Ithaca, Syracuse, Elmira, Binghamton, 9 times out of 10, it's affecting JFK, Newark, that type of stuff. So to get us to move away from that East Coast area with weather, that's actually good. And, spring and fall, Newark has a big challenge, right? The runways they're parallel runways. So if the weather, rain or fog come in, they actually go down to one runway, which then that's when you start getting delays and cancellations and stuff like that. So it's not a bad thing for us. Dulles was really a really strong hub for us when they were here before. So hopefully we can get back to Dulles. The numbers will be good. We start adding a third, then a fourth. We start that growing process on really a better hub for United. And to answer your question on the flight that did crash in Toronto, that was here. The system, that plane could be in Ithaca one day and Hawaii the next day. So they're all over in the system, and it was here. Preliminary thing, it doesn't sound like it was a mechanical issue. I mean, there was something that happened on the landing. So we don't want to speculate, but all that'll come out. So,
Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, Josh, I was surprised, same as Randy, I think maybe about to hear that it's a switch of flights for United and not additional flights. So are we still only going to have, is it 4 flights out a day?
That's correct for right now. And then summertime, we'll go to 5, and then we're working with Delta, to hopefully increase. We're really struggling to try to get them to come back. We're really looking for that westbound connection. But switching hubs is better than losing 2, right? So
I'm not arguing about that. I just had thought we were adding 2 more flights. Are we still in discussions with American?
Well, I mean, American has got some challenges right now. Of course, getting the right people on the phone. We are talking with them. We're talking with a few other airlines. I don't like to say because
I understand.
We'll have news media calling me tomorrow saying, "Hey, we're here. This is coming in." So conversations are open. We have a lot of people at the table. We're working towards trying to figure out the best way to get other airline service in here. The initial thing that our challenge is we want to make sure that we are growing the 2 airlines that are in here first, right? We want to make them back to capacity where we're at, and then hopefully get that 3rd additional airline in.
Thank you.
So ultimately, the 4 flights daily, and after March, 2 of them will be going to Dulles. The other 2?
We'll stay in JFK.
JFK.
Yeah.
Could I ask one other thing?
Yeah.
We know that our big partner for airline service has to be Cornell University and its global connections. Should we have some kind of a summit with Cornell and bring in their folks and our folks and talk about them using our airport even more than they do? Would that make any sense to do that? I think about apparently years ago they had a central booking department, and now they all do it kind of separately through the departments and things. And I just wondered if we ought to have some kind of a summit. Now that we have a new leader in the community relations office up at Cornell with Jennifer Tavares, who has a long history of working with our airport. I'm just throwing that out as a question. I know Susan wants to respond.
I just wanted to say that, you know, there is currently a legislature Cornell group that gets together at least 3 or 4 times a year. And we didn't have one late last year in December, but the earlier one, which was probably October, this was a topic, the airport and flights and how Cornell uses flights. So it may be that with the, you know, the change in leadership there and with Jennifer, that is something we want. It was a general discussion though, raising some of the issues and concerns about the airport in terms of wanting to make sure that we're using our airport and supporting it. So it's timely probably, so I think it would be good. And I don't know when that group is going to meet next, but I can certainly take that to the group.
Thanks.
Are you part of that group?
I have one thing. We have met with, you know, Cornell in the past, within the last year or so. Of course, they have had a transition of people in the seats, so we just discussed that a week or so ago about getting the right people back to the table, and, you know, so they understand, one, you know, community marketing on that standpoint. There's students that sometimes don't even know that the airport exists, so that was something we were working towards with the previous administration in Cornell, and we just got to keep pushing forward. So,
Are you part of that group, Susan?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. Well,
I mean, I'm assuming I'll stay on it this year, but we'll stay. It hasn't been formally called yet, but I'm guessing I'll be on it again.
well, there's an item we hope you'll take
Yes,
forward.
yeah.
I kind of wondered about that last year when Cornell was negotiating with the city and the school district and the town over contributions that, you know, was that an area where the county ought to be coming back and doing a little talk and specifically focusing on the airport as something that they have a direct connection to. So, Josh, we've got a resolution under 9B, terminal paid parking, software server upgrade, Ithaca Tompkins International Airport, ID number 13113. Would someone like to move that? Susan, second. Randy, anything on this you want to mention?
I could just explain what it is. It's really just updating the computer system that does all the transactions for financials. We decided it would be easier to go to a web-based, after talking with IT and some others, web-based, so you're not actually buying the physical computer. It will always be updated. We'll have the best of the best in the parking lot industry, since we are now running the parking lot. It also allows our maintenance staff and operations staff to actually operate the parking via cell phone. So if somebody's stuck in the parking lot, which does happen occasionally, you know, you're trying to get out at midnight and you lost your parking ticket, that type of stuff, they can actually interface through a phone if they're in a snowplow or something like that, and operate the parking lot. So it's better operational. You could buy the server, but then 3-4 years down the road, we got to buy another server, right? It's just like your laptop. After 2 or 3 years, they're, you know, they don't have the best technology in them. So we thought, you know, going with a web base would make more sense. It would keep us up to date all the time, and we can run a successful parking lot. So.
Okay, thanks, Josh. And noted here that the costs of this are coming out from the parking operations revenue. Any further questions on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Josh, Roxanne gave us a few items for the goals for 2025. Anything you want to highlight there? I think you've covered a
No, I
little
just
bit.
think, I mean, one of our biggest things is we're trying to get back to being self-sufficient. Of course, that has to happen through partnerships with our airlines and growing the industry and cutting costs when we can. You know, like everything, we're trying to run a business here and make sure we're making enough revenue to cover our cost and looking at everything wholeheartedly to make sure that, you know, we're not spending on things we don't need to spend on.
Questions on the goals? They're fairly obvious to us. Norma.
Since Roxanne's not here, I just wanted to point out that we have been working, we're hoping to have a strategic plan. When I say we, the airport is hoping to have a strategic plan due pretty early this year for, it's mostly done. There's a few tweaks that needed to be made, and then we'll bring that forward to the committee. And then the airport master plan, we have regular meetings with the consultant, and that is moving right along with the master plan. So those are very big, time-consuming goals on that list, and I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that for the committee.
Appreciate that. Thank you. You're welcome. Anything further for the airport? Thanks, Josh. We hope Roxanne's okay and not injured too badly.
Ice. It's bad this year, so.
It's all over.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right. Next three items, downtown facilities, planning and sustainability and facilities. So we'll bring Terry and Earl up. And I'll start to my right here, downtown facilities. Randy, have you got any update there?
We haven't met, but Rel and if you could tell me maybe the actual group that you've assembled that have met a few times. And our next meeting is March 4th, but I'll let them do the updates.
So we have met with HALT. It's a small internal group. It's myself and Katie and Megan from Planning and Sustainability. Our focus has been over the last probably 2 to 3 weeks is putting together what we intend to submit to the State Historic Preservation Office as part of the initial task that we're doing with HALT. So we had, I think, 3 meetings. We'll be meeting again in early March. We've been gathering a lot of information to put together in the application. We think we're going to be successful. I heard just yesterday that what we're planning to do is submit an application, and then we've invited 2 folks from the SHPO office to come on site after they've reviewed the application, do a site tour of the 3 buildings, the Key Bank building, the professional building, and building C. And then we would meet, we're actually going to have a meeting here in the conference table afterwards to discuss and review the application. We think it will be effective to have them look at the buildings. The consultant that Holt hired to put together the application felt that seeing the buildings after they had read the reports and never seen them actually was effective in convincing her that those buildings are most likely not worth saving. And so they think that in having that walkthrough and having them actually see the condition of the buildings and the cost that it would take to make the improvements will help in our argument to deconstruct the buildings and build a new building. Aside from that, last Friday, we had our kickoff meeting with all the departments that will be involved in the center of government. Not only those departments will be going into the new building, but also those that will be occupying the old jail. And we're actually here, we're going to make improvements to this building to provide additional space for the legislative office. And so planning and sustainability would move out of this building. So we had a meeting with all of those departments. I think it's 16 of them. It's departments and agencies. So the 2 non-county departments that are affected would be ITCTC, that is downstairs, and the Labor Department. The Labor Department would have to co-locate with Workforce Development. So they've always been a part of these space discussions. So the meeting that we had last Friday was a little over an hour, was to indicate that we're going to be doing an update to their space program. The last time we did that formally was in 2022. And so we handed out their space program. They're going to review it, and then we'll be scheduling meetings with departments one-on-one, Holtz, myself, to go over the department's space program and then finalize that space program. So that meeting went well. We opened it up to questions, indicated that we also want to, in the one-on-one discussions, discuss other requirements such as, access, public access, parking, security, remote work, all of that as we put together or finalize our space program. So I think it's going well. I think that first step, the SHPO application, is what is really the focus. Once we get the approval to move forward, then we can start with the other tasks that we've hired Holt to do with us.
Thanks, Shurtleff. Any questions on downtown facilities? Randy?
Yeah, thank you, Arel. One of the, one department spoke to me and said they felt like they weren't being heard by legislators. They're being heard by you, but not by us. So I just want to share that. I don't know what that means. But I just wanted to share that they feel like, because legislatures are making the decision on where people are going to be placed, and they felt that, they just weren't heard. So I'm just sharing that.
Okay.
So one of the things I'd like us to do is to look at the rest of the buildings in this historic district, the courthouse, this building, the other building, and the exterior, how they look on the exterior. I don't think they really present well, and so especially around the courthouse, there's not good plantings. It probably needs to be power washed. Whatever those maintenance things that need to be done. And so to bring SHPOs down here, to me, the presentation's important, right? So I just wanted to share my thoughts on that. And maybe the thing to do would be to say, this is what we're going to do on this building on the inside. It's part of this project, right? So it's not just, that new building. I had one other thought and I forgot what it was, but, I do. So I think you're right about SHPO. I think you're doing all the right things there. I've got no issues with that. And one of the arguments that Holt discussed was that the setback from the Key Bank building is pretty far up. And to really make this all look well, the setback's got to be a certain way. Right. And you want to be maybe similar to what the Boardman House is or whatever it is. So I'm hopefully that makes sense to SHPOs. But one of the questions I had is the value of working with SHPO, is that hopefully we get some type of grant funding for this project. So is that something that Holt's addressing early on? Because it's also not just state, it's also federal, right? Because they are administrators of both historic districts, I guess. So what are your thoughts on that? And are we spending all this time for something we're not going to get?
Well, it's a good question. One of the additional services that we did hire Holt to do was to explore opportunities, grant opportunities, not only on energy side, but other opportunities for this project. We've done that with other energy projects, green facilities that we'll be talking about here shortly. So yes, that's a service that we've asked them to do. We know NYSERDA is one that we will go after. Another one that's unclear, and Terry may have a little more information, is the IRA one that we actually sought for Bostrick Road project geothermal, and that one that we're looking for the emergency response center geothermal. So yes, we are looking both for state and federal grants. And that's really the reason that SHPA would be involved, is if we are looking at getting grants or rebates or anything of that nature, either state or federal. So yes, we're pursuing that. We've already identified some minor ones, but as part of the services that they will be offering to us, that is one of the ones that we've asked them to do for us.
Thank you.
Thanks for the discussion. I appreciated that Chairman Klein continued on the downtown facilities component this year, because you get a lot of open-ended questions here right now to get resolved, and the attention is good. So we'll come back to you in a minute.
Okay.
Or a few minutes. Terry's with us, Department of Planning and Sustainability, and I see Katie's online as well. And we have a discussion on green facilities phase 2 and beyond.
Yeah, I think before we started with that, I think, Katie, you were saying that you wanted to do the department goals?
We could do that.
If that works for you, Lee.
Sure, Katie.
Okay. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. So we had 2 of our 7 key planning initiatives for the year that fell under this committee's purview. The first is this summer will be the big every 3-year triennial review with the FTA for a review of the county's handling of FTA dollars and TCAT and Gadabout and our other mobility partners. So Frank and his team have been diligently working to prepare all of us for a successful review. So that's one of our key goals this year. And, every review seems like they need to find some deficiencies. So our hope is to have 5 or fewer deficiencies found in our review. That's our measure of success. The second one is having to do with downtown facilities and looking at a possible downtown district heating and cooling system for the downtown campus, and looking at that, and especially in light of the center of government, and completing that study in a timely manner to be able to inform the design of the building and considerations for HVAC systems.
Thanks.
Oh, and then the last one we've reported to HED, but this committee should know as well. We do have one equity indicator that we've identified, which is reporting on the cost burdens for renters and homeowners in the county, and trying to break that down to whatever demographic information is available, with the caveat that the data is not great on the demographic information, and much of it is from the decennial census, so it's every 10 years. But we'll try to tease that apart and see what we can tell with that.
Mike.
Hi, Katie. I like your background.
Thank you.
But I wondered, why wouldn't the goal, and I realize it'd be a goal, why wouldn't the goal be to have no deficiencies in this report?
Well, we try to identify achievable measures of success. So that's why, the goal is 0 for sure. And, Frank even was able to get some consultants to come in on the federal government's dime to be able to prepare us to do kind of a test triennial. We're taking this very seriously because the last time there were a lot of deficiencies, as you know, and we need to do significantly better to prove progress to the FTA.
Katie, Frank has moved up to the table here. Maybe he'll expand on that a little bit with you.
No, I think Katie said it perfectly. We had 37 plus deficiencies when I started in March. We cured all of them by November. The reality of the picture is, the important thing that I think you all need to hear is it's been a 360-degree turn on how well TCAT, Gadabout, and the county are working together. So much so that in our meetings with the FTA, they've noticed that. that's been very positive. FTA has been very supportive of providing us with funds to get consultants to come in and prepare us for this. But I also want to be realistic. So I gave Katie the goal that no more than 5. I hope by the end of August, we're able to come to you and say we have none, but I don't want to overpromise. I really think realistically, we should have no more than 5 deficiencies.
I think that's a fair answer. Thanks, Frank. Further questions for Katie? Okay. Well, why don't we move over to Terry? And do you want to do a presentation or discussion first, or go to the resolution?
Why don't we do the presentation first, because I just brought it up here. And this is something that I'll do some presenting here, and Arel's joining me for this piece as well. And so we'll just jump right into it. So I thought we'd start by looking at kind of why we're doing what we're doing. And in large part, it's because the legislature has set out some goals starting, way back in the early 2000s, throughout the mid 2010s, and then, continuing on. You can see kind of, I don't have to read out everything, but we've started with different levels of emissions reduction goals, and kind of where we're at today is from our 2019 energy strategy update, where we are trying to strive for the largest reduction in the shortest time frame while remaining fiscally solvent. Obviously that being a key piece of that. And what we stated in that energy strategy update was that we were going to do a high-level analysis to determine what was the path to reach net zero emissions. And what that led into was the green facilities and green fleet capital projects. And obviously we're focused on the facilities for this particular presentation. In terms of the green facilities capital project timeline, I think there's a lot of folks in this room that weren't around when the first capital budget was kind of presented in 2019. So that first budget was presented by 2 county administrators ago at this point, Jason Molina, and he recommended $32 million for net zero emissions facilities. What ended up being adopted in the budget for that year was $30 million. In 2021, starting in 2020 into 2021, Arel and then myself, when I joined the county, were working with Johnson Controls to do that high-level study that was called for by the energy strategy. And what was adopted at that point was a 3-phased approach. And that's the approach that we've talked about with this committee a number of different times. And then in 2022, there was an adopted capital budget to provide $28 million over 5 years. And so that number, that $28 million, came down from the $30 million on the basis of that 3-phased approach. That was determined what was going to be necessary in order to meet the net zero facilities approach. So this is what that original 3-phase plan looks like. The first one in the yellow was phase 1. It was supposed to be from 2022 to 2023. The blue was supposed to be 24 to 25, and then the last phase was to start next year in 2026. That original phase had us targeting a lot of the low-hanging fruit, but doing some significant projects as well. And then even though the 2 phases that follow on look smaller, they are still quite significant. And actually, these are the original numbers when we came up with that 3-phase plan. If you look at it, just about every phase was right around a similar number, about a third. And so, it really was meant to be 3 somewhat equal phases with, phase 1 and phase 2 being, somewhat larger than the third phase. So we did start on phase 1 in 2022, and it took us a little bit longer. Obviously, COVID had an impact, but this was the projects that kind of fell under that first phase 1. And I've shown this in a different presentation, so I don't want to spend too much time. But we've showed this these 2 slides at a previous F&I committee. Originally it was supposed to be a $7 million phase 1. It ended up being $14 million. Yes, inflation and shortages had an impact on it, but a lot of it had to do with scope change. We did pull some of the projects that originally were going to be in phase 2 down into phase 1. But from there, we were able to get some utility funding, about $540,000 from the utility. And then this key piece, this Inflation Reduction Act. So this was something that was made available through the Inflation Reduction Act. It's an energy tax credit that has existed for many years, was previously only available to commercial entities that had a tax burden. Us being a municipality, we've never had a tax burden. We don't pay taxes. But it made it available to tax-exempt entities, and so we were able to capitalize on that and apply for it for the first time ever. And so that's something that we applied for. The projects have to be completed, so the project was completed in 2023. You apply for it in the following tax year, so 2024. So we filed for it last year in 2024, and unfortunately, we're still awaiting word. We were told probably 60 to 90 days. Last week, a week ago actually, was, hit us with that 90 days. And so we're a little over what was anticipated. Obviously within that you have the holidays, you have the transition in administrations. And so I'm not panicking yet, but we are, somewhat concerned that we haven't seen that. But in addition to the funding that we were able to generate from that project, there was some anticipated savings from that first phase. And so you can see, anticipating over $100,000 in utility costs and then 524 metric tons of CO2.
Terry, I got a question for you on that.
Please.
On the Inflation Reduction money.
Yeah.
Were they anticipated in the beginning when this phased project was put together?
No, so when the first phases were put together, it wasn't yet available to municipalities, so it wasn't anticipated until 2023. I think it was late 22, 23 that the actual Inflation Reduction Act was passed. So we were already started the project, already had it underway.
So would you consider that found money as far as being able to?
I would say it was found money. I will also say that we had also gone after a grant that we were hoping to get that was right around that same amount of money. So in some ways it kind of supplanted, we didn't get that grant, but then this opportunity came in and kind of supplanted it. So we were still hopeful to get right around that level of funding, just from a different source.
And on the anticipated savings, I know we did some adjustments in the budget process on utilities. Would you consider that part of the success of the first phase? We were able to reduce utilities by, I think, $100,000.
I think some of it, I will say the $100,000 is from Johnson Controls. Utility savings are such a difficult thing to track just because, you look at what we're going to spend this year compared to last year, most of our systems are the exact same. But this winter, I heard it was 9 degrees colder on average in January than it was this year than it was last year. That has a tremendous impact on your utility bills. And so navigating how much of the savings is from the project, versus how much of it is weather dependent is hard to track. But I would say probably it has some impact on how much we're saving. And in addition to that, also energy costs go up. That's the other piece. When you assume that it's going to rise 3%, with inflation, energy costs have gone way up above 3%, unfortunately.
I think we all see that.
Yeah.
Thanks for humoring me here.
Yeah, of course. So then we, in 2024, started phase 2 development. And so this was originally kind of what Arel and myself were talking with Johnson Controls about looking at. So some of these were projects that had moved from phase 1 to phase 2 because the funding couldn't be found, like the window and roof replacements. Some of it was a little bit of a change, looking at geothermal for a couple of buildings, the solar carports. But by and large, this is, it's a slight change from what we saw in the original phase 2 a couple slides ago, but it's pretty similar. You'll see some of those same things: geothermal, garage door controls, carport, boiler replacement, those types of things. What ended up happening is we came to you in April of 2024. We proposed 5 different projects: a boiler replacement at the Human Services Building, an HVAC upgrade at Dewar to geothermal, and then 3 different solar projects, one at the Human Services Building, one at Public Works, and one at the Health Department. And the projected total for those 5 projects after rebates was a little over $5.2 million. At that presentation, what we had been asking was approval to go into detailed design, which once committed basically means that the county would have to pay some amount of cost if we didn't go through with the project. So that's why we had come to the committee to ask to be able to do detailed design on those 5 projects. You gave us that approval. We moved forward with that. But then through the 2025 budget planning process, phase 2 actually got cut down to just 2 of the 5 projects. And so the boiler replacement at the Human Services Building was one of those projects that was deemed necessary. That boiler is, has the potential to fail at any point, and so that was a critical project that had to be changed. And then the solar at the health department, we were able to get a $825,000 grant from the state, from New York State, for some other clean energy actions that we had taken, and so that project became largely funded already, and so that was able to go through. So there was also a tentative 3rd project, the geothermal at Dewar, that was eyed up, but it was somewhat dependent on being able to attain a grant through the CFA, which we unfortunately weren't able to obtain. So where we're at now is you can see this pie chart on the right provided to us by Johnson Controls. That green was what we were able to take on in phase 1 in terms of carbon emission savings. The yellow, that small pie slice, is what we're projected to do for phase 2. And then what we're left with is that gray slice, which is a little under half of what we were targeting in the original 3-phased approach. And so where we're at is, we've reduced phase 2 pretty substantially. We're going with just the 2 projects compared to, what we had originally set out, which was, I think, 7 or 8 projects down to 5 projects down to 2 projects. We're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. The Inflation Reduction Act tax credits, we're waiting on our 2023 returns, the $1.76 million for what we did at Bostwick Road. We're still anticipating that they'll come in, but there is some uncertainty on that level. There's also a lot of uncertainty that the tax credits will continue to be available past 2025. So that if you were to do projects in 26, 27, 28, those might not be able to be available to be drawn upon. When it was originally set out, those funds were supposed to be available through 2032. It's unclear if that's going to continue to be the case. If the IRA funding were to be guaranteed, if we were to have a certainty that we were going to be able to get the tax credits that we already applied for, as well as tax credits for the future projects, it would bring down that Dewar HVAC upgrade down to just a little over $1 million in local share. So it is a pretty heavy amount of funding that we're waiting for, that we would be hoping for. Without it, what we're looking at is a possible $4.3 million price tag for the county. So it's substantial. And just to say that if the IRA funding is discontinued, it does have a potential impact for future projects. So any of the future solar geothermal projects, it would have a major impact. But it would also mean if we don't end up getting this 2023 payment that we were anticipating, that we have to find funding for just about $286,000, $287,000 for what we contracted with phase 2 project that we were anticipating covering with that phase 1 filing that we had already done. So there is a potential impact. So, obviously we'll come back to you as soon as we have a firm understanding on whether we're going to get those funds or not. We've reached out through contacts that we have to the IRS to try and understand what's going on and haven't received word yet. So we'll keep plugging away at that.
I have a question on that, but
yeah.
I don't know I don't want to jump ahead of you with the rest of your presentation.
There's just one more slide, so feel free to.
And this may be a Norma question. We reserved in the contingency fund $250,000, I believe, to go toward, I think it was the DOER. Is that correct?
That was correct. Yeah, that is correct. But the cost of the project itself would be well over what the county can support at this point in the budget.
And how would that relate to the 286 if everything fell together?
Well, it could go, we could take it from the contingent fund. The other thing is we do have a capital reserve fund that could also be tapped to cover that type of a project because it is a capital project. So we should be okay to cover that.
So we're anticipating a little bit here, moving ahead.
We're
fair to say?
Preparing, yeah.
And I don't know, are we talking at all about traditional, replacing the doer of?
Well, so that kind of gets into the last slide here. And part of the reason why we wanted to have this conversation, Morel and myself are operating under kind of the legislative direction that we have from the 2019 energy strategy, the 2022 capital budget. When we have conversations, we still hope for $28 million in total for green facilities. Phase one was $14 million. Phase two is using, at this point, no local share of funding. And we still have what we thought was going to be a phase three down the road. I guess, so where we're at, and that would include decarbonization at the health department, downtown campus, additional solar. It includes the needed doer HVAC change. So that's something, even if we don't do the geothermal project, which is about $4.3 million, it still requires a new boiler and chiller. So I think when we ran the numbers the other day, it was like $500,000 for that. So it'd still be trying to find $500,000 to pay for that. So where we're at this point is looking for some direction on where the legislature wants to go. Because we can come up with phases and put projects in front of you, but if there's not a desire to fund them or go forward with that, we don't want to waste a lot of staff time. And obviously we'll keep looking for funding. We'll keep looking for grant opportunities for tax credits if they continue to exist. But it would be helpful to have some indication from this committee, from the legislature as a whole, on kind of what they want us to be focused on moving forward on this specific initiative, green facilities.
A couple questions come to mind, and I'm going to bounce back to Norma. The $28 million anticipated in the capital program over 5 years, that's still there to work with. We haven't reduced that at all, have we?
I have to go back and look, but it had been adjusted through the last few years due to an additional, when
had to absorb the
when this
additional
project
$7
came
million.
forward, we were not planning on having to build a shelter. There are things that have happened, the cost of the center of government building, public safety building. There's a lot of competing priorities with the legislature. So really it's a matter of where do we want to set those priorities? Do we want to postpone some initiative to be able to provide the funding to continue this project, or do we, where do those priorities lie and how we spend our money?
I guess Randy's going to have a question. I guess my answer back, or at least some of my thinking on it, is that it's really got to integrate with the developing plan of the downtown campus, and that's probably where you've got as big an impact to move the overall program forward. But that's just kind of my speculation on it. So it's Randy.
Norma, you put together a capital plan, probably 3 or 4 of them since I've been here. It'd be helpful, I think, maybe at our next meeting if we saw what was happening with the capital plan, because if I remember correctly, it does reduce slowly over the next, it did reduce slowly over the next 5 to 6 years to see how these things plug in, to see how we can kind of balance our capital plan going forward. That would help me. I have a question though on slide 10.
Yeah, as soon as I took it down, Andy.
Slide 9, maybe.
Slide 9. All right, let me pull this presentation back up here.
Maybe it was 9. But anyways, and you show that you put a new roof replacement on the library. Didn't you also replace the rooftop units as well last year?
So we did not do the roof replacement at the library. So phase 1, there were projects that they would have pushed us over. And so we basically deferred the roof replacement at the library. We did do the rooftop units. That was something that was moved up from phase 2 to phase 1. So that was part of the scope changes that we did. The other scope change, which was significant, was at the Bostwick Road. The geothermal was only going to be partial for the building. And so we said, well, what would it take to go 100% geothermal? And that's when the opportunity, the Inflation Reduction Act came into play, it wouldn't have been possible with just a portion of the building. So we, by going full amount, what we were expecting, we felt almost paid for that additional scope, so that was significant. But as far as the roof replacement at library, that was not done as part of phase one, was put as part of phase two initially, but then we only narrowed it down to two, the boiler replacement and the solar, but also the window replacements at mental health. That was part of phase, I think it was phase one as well, that we also delayed. So, I mean, these are things that are falling under kind of replacement of systems in our buildings, and that we're putting, because they both roof and windows have an energy component to it, but it's not if we look at that earlier slide, it says the carbon reductions, it affects energy, but not in a significant way, but it's still energy related. And so those types of projects that have an energy component can be part of the green facilities, but we delayed them. So kind of the challenge is, we didn't do them. We have to do it at some point. Those windows at the mental health building are original to the building when it was built in, I think, 93. They're due for replacement, as well as the roof at the library. That's beyond its warranty, and a few other things. The emergency response center boiler system, Shurtleff, that was original when we did it 23 years ago. And so these are all systems that are in the schedule for replacement. And so if we don't do these, I'm gonna have to come back and say we're gonna have to do it as a separate capital project, either as a capital reserves or something. So it's not going away, unfortunately. And what would be a shame would be if we move forward with just a in-kind boiler replacement at Department of Energy response, and let's say 3 years from now, the legislature decides to move forward with the green facilities, and then we go geothermal. We've already basically thrown that money, we've wasted that money, because a geothermal would use different types of systems than what we would have put up there, like chillers or air handling units. So we timed everything with the phases that we did, 3 years ago when we did the three-phase approach. And so by not moving forward, which we realize there are competing challenges and other capital projects, doesn't mean that some of these replacements are going to go away. I'll have to come back either through contingency or otherwise to fund doing these projects.
Yeah, just to add on one little thing, I mean, there are definitely projects that can be pushed off because they're more, would be great to do. Like a lot of the solar projects, we don't have to do the solar projects. Like, would we love to do them? Yeah, absolutely. There would be some savings from doing them on our energy bills. But there are certain projects, the ones that Arel mentioned, there's the health department, which isn't imminent, but it's within the next 10 years, needs to have an HVAC upgrade. I mean, so these are projects that, will have to have a solution at some point. It's up to the legislature on kind of which solution, which path they want us to take.
Right, because if you look at that one, I know it's small, but window in the first grouping, the kind of the yellow tan, it says window replacement carbon reduction is 2.8, roof replacement is 3.1. 3.1. So it's a small reduction compared to some of the other ones on the list. And so, I mean, that's another reason why we said, well, it's a lot of money if you're looking cost per, carbon reduction. We looked at those things in making decisions for phase one, but also for phase two, is where we're getting most bang for our buck to reduce the carbon emissions, because that's essentially the goal that we're trying to achieve for the county and the legislature. So yeah, it's tough, unfortunately. And I've said it many times before, by delaying things, it's not going to be cheaper. And so at some point we're going to have to, grapple with doing some of these projects, which are systems that need to be replaced because they're approaching the end of their design life.
I see Susan, then Mike.
For the library, I knew that the roof hadn't been done, but there was something done, I think, not last year, but the year before, because there had been leaking in the use of.
Yes, we did some,
but there
still.
Yeah,
under warranty, we did some repairs and of the roofing system.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's to the point where it's beyond its warranty, and so any further work, it's going to cost us. It's not covered under warranty.
And the solar panels, I know have been
yes
a challenge for a very, very long time with all the little I know they're used to go and pull the trees out, the little trees growing in that solar panel thing. So
Yeah, so those are non-functional at this point. I mean,
Oh,
they're
that's what the question I had,
over
so-
25 years old, and so
Keep asking about,
we're
yeah.
looking at removing them, and there's,
That's great.
yeah, we have different proposals, because if you want to do it and reuse them, recycle them, you're paying more money than just to dispose of them.
Mike?
Well, Susan hit on exactly what I wanted to say about the library roof. And if anybody hasn't gone up in the parking structure and looked over at that roof, and I know I looked at it last fall, and you're right, and they aren't little trees anymore. They're 3 or 4 feet tall, some of them. And certainly that's going to need attention over there. And while I think about it, it looked to me, the bump out on the south side of the building looked like it had been hit by a truck or something.
Yeah, it's been hit multiple times,
Yeah, there was
and
an accident last year, yeah.
yes.
Did we get insurance to cover that?
Yes, and we even have the paneling. The contractor went out of business. McPherson had a contract to do it, and even the materials, and then they went out of business. And so we have the materials to replace it. We've done it 3 times, and we've marked it, everything, and it keeps getting clipped by like delivery trucks or moving trucks clip it. So yes, it's something that we will be addressing as part of a project that we have planned for this year for the entire exterior facade.
Thank you.
So you're looking for some direction.
Yes.
A lot to absorb here.
What we don't want is we have a failure of a system, let's say emergency response, and then we have to basically replace it quickly, a boiler, let's say. We actually, I did report to this committee several months ago with a chiller. We had a chiller failure up there, and so fortunately we were able to replace compressors, two of the 4 compressors, which typically on a unit that old we would just replace everything. But knowing that we were looking at a phase 2 geothermal, which you wouldn't use a chiller for geothermal, we said, let's see if we can, spend a minimal amount. And initially it was $20,000. We were able to work out a great deal with Johnson Controls. They had a good vendor, and we ended up paying like $8,000 to replace those 2 chillers. But otherwise, to replace the entire chiller, it would probably be upwards of $100,000 to $120,000 to do that. And that's where I'm saying we replace it, and then let's say 4 years later, it's decided to move forward with the geothermal. That's money that you're not going to recoup. You wouldn't be using a chiller system. So that's my concern, is that we have failures of systems that are already scheduled for replacement that we would have to move quickly. Human Services, building boilers, that's why we have it this year moving forward to do that, because those are original installed in 1997.
Okay, Norma's got a hand up.
Yeah, I'm just putting my budget hat on and county administration hat. So looking at the replacing the doer with traditional boiler replacement, that's about 20-year life cycle for a boiler. It doesn't necessarily meet the carbon emission reduction that was on the green the plan, but what would it do? Do you have that? I mean, if we put a high efficiency boiler in, it's a 20-year replacement. It's unlikely that if you've replaced it, you're not going to go 4 years down the road and say we're going to replace it with a geothermal system. You would be looking to replace that next time with a geothermal system. What would we save in carbon emissions by just making that replacement and not taking the risk?
Let me see, I'm pulling up a different document to see if I have that.
I think Norma's pulled us in the direction I was going to see if we could head toward, is what would the capital program allow us to do in the context of the must-dos, and maybe a little more than the emergency repairs would be.
If I remember right, isn't it right around $1 million to replace the boiler at Dewar and the boiler at DSS, right?
So for the replacement at emergency response for the boiler, the chiller, I think we talked about it being right around $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
That would result in a carbon emissions reduction of about 4 metric tons. The geothermal costing about $4 million is, if we're not able to get any of the incentives that we anticipate, is a reduction of 43 metric tons. So, it's a substantial cost increase, it's a substantial reductions increase, and so that's kind of, again, we're operating from the directive that was in that energy strategy and from the capital plan. So, and that's what we're trying to figure out is, should we keep going in that direction? When we're looking at upgrading systems, which direction should we be heading? As we look towards the Dewar upgrade, a possible replacement at the public health department, in upcoming years, should we be planning for that to go in a direction where we're focused on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, or is it just save money because we have these other things going on? And thankfully, we don't make that decision. You guys give us the direction for that.
Further thoughts?
No, you had the question I had. You
Randy?
So going back to how you pay for all this, the capital plan review would help. It also would help for facilities say, you have some funding for repairing things, but to show over the next 3 years, we really got to do this. We really got to do that. We really have to do this to understand that one way or another, we're going to spend this money. So that would be helpful for me to look at the bigger plan. And then if you look at your capital plan and you say, okay, well, we can afford to add $400,000 per year to the capital plan over the next 20 years. Now you have funding for some things. So that's why I need to understand for me.
I think one other question kind of pops up with me is that some of the exploration was on the downtown campus, and what are the thoughts as far as that being incorporated into the larger bond when you've got to move forward with the construction? I don't think we're going to, that's not going away.
That's in the capital plan now, I think. I can't remember the years, but.
We just don't have the exact number. I mean, he does his best to give us the best estimate he can at the time, but that was a couple of years ago that we got that estimate, and we don't know. And now if we add geothermal, which really probably makes the most sense to add geothermal downtown, that's going to increase the cost over the estimate probably that we received as well. So those are all factors that, while we can guess as best we can, there are probably several $1 million that we have not taken into consideration yet until we have a full plan from the consultants.
I'm just thinking, out loud that to me, it just seems as though if these downtown projects are going to be done in concert with the development of a structure or whatever the solution is, it probably ought to get wrapped into that project in some manner and allow you the flexibility of the current three-phase program to be used to move forward the things we got to do.
So when we did the original three-phase, the courthouse complex was in that third phase. It was supposed to happen along that timeline. Katie mentioned this when she was talking about our department goals, but we just had a kickoff actually last week with our consultant CHA to do a feasibility study to look at what a district heating system, so a system that would connect, this building, the old jail, the main courthouse, and then a possible center of government building to connect them with geothermal. So we should be, hopefully by mid to late summer, have some numbers to show what that would look like. And we've also asked them to look at, okay, if we were to just do these buildings as individual geothermal systems, separate and distinct, what would that look like? And so at that point, we'll be able to provide some idea of, if you wanted to head in this direction, what would be a possible cost? What would be the additional cost to a possible center of government project? But if you decide not to do that, if you were to just look at decarbonizing each building in this campus individually, kind of what that would look like as well, because that's something that we didn't really talk about in this presentation, but is on my mind because we went through the buildings last week. I mean, the heating systems in each of these buildings are old. They also all need replacement very soon, and so we've been looking at this district system as like, okay, that's going to be the way that we can possibly do this. But if that price tag ends up looking very large, and especially if these Inflation Reduction Act incentives go away. I mean, that had the potential to cover, 30 to 50% of a project cost. I mean, that was a substantial amount of funding if that doesn't come back, or if it doesn't remain. If we then decide, okay, that the cost of doing a district system is too high, then we have to look at what the cost of doing each of these individual buildings is. And even if you decide not to go with geothermal to decarbonize them, it's still replacing a lot of boilers, a lot of chillers, a lot of individual systems. And so that's substantial in cost.
We're not giving you much direction at this point.
But you're definitely moving forward with the DSS building.
Yes.
For new boilers there this year?
Yeah. Yeah, they've already started design. We'll be meeting with them very soon, probably the next couple of weeks, to go over submittals and systems and talk about installations and lead times and all that.
Great, thank you.
You've given us a lot of information here. It's still some to absorb, but that presentation was excellent because I did have some questions about the phasing of the capital program. And will that be incorporated into the minutes or shared in some area? I was looking quickly through the agenda and
Oh, is it not in the agenda?
I saw it in there.
Oh, okay.
It's in the agenda, it's really small.
After this.
The presentation.
Just committee or to the whole legislature?
I think it'd be good to go to the whole committee because I know there have been concerns expressed by some of the other legislators about our ability to move forward on the green facilities, and I think that gives a lot of answers to it.
Absolutely.
And also kind of alerts the rest of the legislature to some of the challenges we've got this year in prioritizing what's left. Keep working numbers.
Yeah, no, we'll keep looking for it. So that's the bad news, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. I get the resolution is some good news. It's us bringing in some money to the county. So.
Okay, and Terry is referring to 11A, Green Facilities Phase 2 and Beyond, ID number 13119. And I have a motion from Randy, second by Susan. And you, quick description?
Yeah, so when you buy electric vehicles as a municipality in New York State, the DEC puts out a program annually. They didn't do it in 2023, but they did put it out in 2024, and it covered 2023 as well, which is why we were able to submit the number of vehicles that we did. We submitted by far the largest share of vehicles and received the largest share of money in the state from this program. So we're grateful for New York State for providing us this funding. But essentially, yeah, it depends on the range of the electric vehicle that you're purchasing. If it's over 200 miles of range, you can get up to $7,500 back. So we were able to capitalize that for a lot of the vehicles that we purchased in 23 and 24 and vehicles that we lease. So it's not just the purchased vehicles, it's the vehicles that we're leasing through Enterprise as well. So this is the mechanism that, I think you brought up at maybe even the last presentation I was here at, Mike, the cost comparison between the vehicles, an electric vehicle and a regular gas combustion engine vehicle. This is the mechanism, along with some of the federal IRA funding, that brings those vehicles not only into parity, but actually brings them below what we would buy for a gas combustion vehicle in some cases.
Shuffling paper here, 80-some thousand?
$80,000, yeah. We applied for a first round, which was I think 72.5, and then we had an additional vehicle that we were able to slip in before the deadline for an additional 7,500.
Further questions? Discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Keep moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I apologize that your presentation was within the agenda here, a smaller slideshow than my bifocals were allowing me to. Rel, have you got anything you want to update us on other facility issues?
With highway, you discussed the salt. With facilities, our challenge has been ice melt. And so I did a department head meeting last Wednesday, indicated that we would be using ice melt more sparingly as far as sidewalks. We use the salt on the parking lot, it's the same one that highway uses. We get it from the salt barn, but because we were having challenges through our vendor, but also locally, we cleaned out. We took the last pallet from Lowe's early, I think either early last week or the week before, and we got some from another pallet from J.C. Smith. But then our vendor that had told us that they didn't have any from an order that we'd placed way over a month ago, delivered like the next day 2 pallets. So we've got at least, and maybe I shouldn't be saying it publicly because now they're going to come after us for.
Everybody in my district keeps
we have
looking
them in a
for it.
secure location. Ice melt, and what I've suggested to our maintenance crews is to use the sweepers as much as possible so that way they can at least, be more sparing in the usage of ice melt. Whereas before if we had light snow cover, we would just put ice melt instead of sweep it off. So we're doing that. So for now, I think we're doing pretty good as long as this winter doesn't last much longer. But yeah, it's been tough. We haven't had a winter like this in many years where we've gone through so much ice melts and had running crews.
Every day gets us closer to next winter.
Yeah. And as far other projects, our cold storage is still yet to be completed. We pulled crews and contractors off of that project in the late summer to divert them over to the Code Blue project, and then also to the Emergency Response Center, the dispatch, the new dispatch room there that they had an open house a couple of weeks ago, I think. So we were heavily involved with Mike Stitley on that. So that's complete. As you know, Code Blue's been done for a couple of months. And so we are waiting for NYSEG to provide power to the cold storage so we can start to use it both we're splitting it. Remember, 50% is soil and water, and the other 50% of that 6,000 square foot cold storage is for facilities. We're wrapping up the public safety building. We're basically in the punch list and closeout documentation phase of that project. And those are really the capital projects. So, you know that we're proud owners of the Cherry Street 225 to 227 Cherry Street property. And so I walked those properties about a little more than a week ago, and we got the keys and transfer utilities. We're already getting approached by some of the surrounding property owners about, I think, what the county is planning to do there. Frank Polangeli, I think, approached the county, and I've got to return a call to him. So at this point, that's what, at least on the capital side, I've been involved in. On the maintenance side, where our crews have been, very involved in snow removals. They came in over the weekend, the long weekend, a few times, but it's going well.
Thanks, Earl. As far as your goals for the year, you've kind of covered a substantial amount of that between the green facilities discussion, the cold storage, and continued work on the center of government downtown resolutions. What any highlights there? Anything else you want to tell us about for goals for the year?
Yeah, I mean, filling the deputy director position is an important one. However, I'm so busy on all this other stuff that wasn't, I mean, the shelters, that was not part of my work plan over a year ago. And now I'm becoming more of an expert on shelters. But,
so are we all.
And so it's tough to do the operation side of our department and then also the capital side. But it's something that I've been discussing with county administration, and we'll be discussing with Corsa soon as far as kind of what the plan to move forward on that, but that's an important one. Otherwise, I think it's going well. I have a good team in our department, hard workers and very responsive to all the departments in the county. I agree, Randy, as you say, I've always been, I think it's important that people get a first impression by what they see. But unfortunately, with some of the funding that we have, we're always, putting out fires and, boilers, pumps, things like that. And many times it leaves not as much money to do those types of beautification projects. I know in years past, we worked with the swap crews out of probation to do stuff like that with us. I know like library folks would do plantings, on their own. We would provide plants and things to do that. And I would like to get back to that. I think some of the challenges that we have are staffing as we're bringing on more buildings. We've not increased our staff. And so it's a challenge to really focus our priorities. And I mean, obviously our priorities are safety, security, functioning of our buildings, and those types of things as important as they are to me. Sometimes there's not enough time or funding to do that. And that's, I think, what the challenge is as we're talking about funding. We have limited funding on the facilities restoration that's on this list is number 4, continued facilities restoration capital projects. Some of that was cut for this year significantly. And so the funding that we have, there's no way that we could do a roof replacement or window replacements. I mean, those are multi-million-dollar projects. And so those types are small things that we could do. One of them is we want to do some beautification around the library, the IFAS and the brickwork and that back bump out that Michael was asking about. So those are types of things, but we can't do a roof replacement. Those are over $1 million. We can't do a window replacement. Those are nearly $2 million. And so those are all challenges that will be looked at as we look at the capital plan moving forward.
Thanks, Shurtleff. Questions?
Yes.
I'm not sure how much more we can give you to
I know.
jump in and
I'm always looking.
add to it. Mike?
Well, just on that point, I can't think of a time when facilities, that I've been in the legislature, that facilities hasn't been understaffed and underfinanced. It's one of those departments that does everything for us, and yet it seems like when we have money, it doesn't go there that it should. So I'll just say that. The other thing I wanted to bring up, if I may, with Arel here, is Chambers here. When this was retrofitted for the legislature and the theater screens were put in, the chandeliers were raised up to almost the ceiling. They used to hang much lower on chains. Now that the majority of the legislature chose to do away with the theater screens, and I see one set is down and the other is probably going to come down, I would hope that we could lower the chandeliers again. I've had a discussion with Rob Henry up in our control room, and he thinks that it might actually help with lighting here to some extent. He can speak for himself, of course, and that he didn't think that it would interfere with the cameras.
Actually, that's a good point. We did raise them because of the projectors, but those aren't used, and so yeah, that can be done. I mean, you're the first one that's formally brought that to my attention, but yeah, that would be simple. I mean, cost-wise, it's not, I'm not going to come to you for contingent. So those are things that we can do, and so yeah, I can talk to Katrina, to Rob, and
they're beautiful chandeliers, and I think it would improve the looks in here a little.
I agree.
Thanks, Shurtleff.
All right, thank you.
All right. Frank, we've kept you at bay here for a while. Oh, Courtney's going to? Okay, please come up with us. Transportation, ITC.
Thank you so much for having me this morning. I have 3 resolutions that I'd like to bring to the table.
Okay. Why don't we take these resolutions one at a time? Under A resolution authorizing the Federal Transit Administration Section 5339C Low and No Emissions Vehicle Program Grant for Tompkins Consolidated Area Transit, TCAT, ID number 13074. Is there a motion? Susan? Second? Randy?
Great.
Quick briefing.
This is a competitive grant that TCAT applied to for roughly $1.2 million to purchase 2 hybrid electric replacement buses. They were awarded this grant in July of 2024. This is an 85-15 split. So that 1.5 million is federal funding, which is 85%, and then TCAT would put up a $300,000 local share. Yes, thank you.
Questions? All in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Second resolution, authorizing submittal of New York State Department of Transportation Section 5311 Rural Formula Grant Program Grant Application 2024-2025, ID number 13072.
Perfect. For this, I'm looking for your approval to submit an application for 5311, which is rural funding. This includes a total of $5.8 million for operating, capital, and mobility management projects for both 2024 and 2025. This is, under operating, is a 50-50 split, 50% federal, 50% state. Capital is 80-10-10, 80% federal, 10% state, 10% local match. And then in this application, we also have roughly $635,000 of COVID relief funding, which is 100% federal funding. There's a lot of different projects in here. The breakdown is in the resolution if you want to look at the specific projects involved, but they do include projects such as First Mile, Last Mile, and Rides to Recovery, which has been spelled out in our mobility vision plan, and so we're excited about implementing those. This proposed application has gone through a 15-day public comment period already. The public notice was in the Ithaca Journal. There's been information sent to all transit providers, including intercity buses and taxis, and this was also posted on the Planning and Sustainability website.
So authorizing the application for the grant.
Yes, thank you.
Is there a motion? Susan, Randy, second. Questions? Seems ambitious,
Yes.
but we'll move a number of priorities forward that Frank has briefed us on over the last year, especially with regard to the mobility plan.
I have a quick question.
Further discussion? All in favor?
I just had a budget question.
I'll hold the
If you don't
declaring
mind.
the vote.
I just wanted to make sure that when we're talking about the local share in this resolution, that this is already budgeted funds? These funds have already been budgeted, or how are those local dollars being covered?
So for each project, it's a separate local match.
Mm-hmm.
For TCAT and Gadabout, they do have capital projects for buses. That local match would be funded by TCAT and Gadabout. For mobility management projects, that has been spelled out in the mobility management contracts and will be put up by the mobility manager or whoever we've contracted with.
So there will be no county funding
Yes,
required?
correct,
Okay,
correct.
that's all I
Sorry.
want to make sure
Yes.
of. Okay, thank you.
Good to have you back, Norma. Okay, I think I saw everybody was in favor. Anybody want to change their position? If not, the motion passes. Thank you. And thanks for those answers, folks. And third resolution, authorizing the Federal Transit Administration Section 5339 Bus and Bus Facilities Program Grants, 5475-2025-1 and 5475-2025-2, ID number 13073, Groton zip code here.
This is the other side, 5339. The first one was a competitive 5339. This one is just our federal allocation from 2024. We were allocated a total of $430,708. What we'd like to do with this is split it up between TCAT and Gadabout. TCAT would get $315,000 roughly. If you're looking at the memo, I apologize, I put the full $394, but that includes the state and local share. Just the federal share is $315,000, and then Gadabout would get $115,000. TCAT would use this for facility rehabilitation, and Gadabout would use this for the purchase of a Lot E bus. This again is an 80-10-10 split, and the local match would come from TCAT and Gadabout respectively.
I think you answered the question that was going to come out. Is there a motion for this? Mike moves, Randy seconds. Further questions or discussion? All in favor? Are there any opposed? Carried.
Mr. Chairman, I think this is the Groton resolution. If you notice the number, it's 13073, which is Groton zip.
Randy.
Just a poor attempt at humor, that's all.
I just wanted to say, I hope your federal funding comes through like you hope. And I wanted to share a story about Gadabout. I know a young woman who, because of a condition, she's not allowed to drive, but she wants to work. And so she worked out a situation so that Gadabout is actually picking her up, and she got a full-time job. So I know, Frank, that was a big discussion for you, and so I just wanted to share that. So
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Yep.
We weren't going to put you on the spot over goals here, but Katie did kind of touch on it, that the triennial review is probably a big area for you this year. Frank, any highlights for the year moving ahead you want to touch on or tell us about some goals you may be working on? You've had a few months to get your feet on the ground.
Yeah, just a few. In reference to the triennial or in reference to the mobility vision?
All of it.
All of it. We have been working really closely together with TCAT, Gadabout, and ourselves, and great technical assistance from the FTA. We're in very good position. We're moving forward. Our intern, Samantha Fields from Workforce Development, has been outstanding in assisting us with getting everything ready. Our triennial review on site will be August 12th and 13th. And then we'll find out after that where we stand, but I'm feeling really confident on that. On the mobility vision, we're extremely excited that FTA agreed to allow us to apply in the 5311 application for funding for first mile, last mile, and rides to recovery to the tune of $125,000 for each program, for a total of $250,000. The next goal that we have is we got to find an additional $125,000 for each program, and we got some very positive outlooks on that, but won't confirm that until it's in hand. Our one call, one click center and our mobility management, Go Ithaca, have been working very closely together with Courtney, do an amazing job of breaking down transportation barriers and getting access. We also met with Veteran Services this week.
Yes.
This week, and found out barriers that veterans are having, and we had some solutions that we passed on to JR that we're putting into motion and setting up meetings. So everything's very positive right now on the mobility vision. We're getting results already this soon, and hopefully you'll be invited soon to our ribbon cutting ceremony for the Mobility as a Service project that you all received $850,000 in 2019. We're kicking it off. We have the app developed. It's being beta tested right now. So everything's going well, but happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Frank. Any questions for Frank? Mike?
I have a couple of things, and maybe Frank or Katie aren't the right person to ask this about, but does anyone know, does TCAT have money for bus shelters?
They do.
I would hope that they would look at the intersection of New York State Route 13, Kirk Road, and Minia Road, which is a lot of folks from the mobile home park, the manufactured home park right near there, come up to that intersection to get the bus. They've put in great pedestrian cross signs, New York State Department of Transportation. They put in a flashing light a couple years ago, all of that. But gosh, I drove by there during that rainstorm we had a couple of days ago, and a couple of people were standing there waiting for the bus in the rain. And I think if that could be looked at, that would be a nice thing to happen.
I will pass that on.
Yeah, thank you.
Bus shelters came up at a recent TCAT board meeting, that there are a number of places, I think, where there's a desire for them, but it's funding.
Well, that's a busy intersection, and I thank you very much for that. The other thing, and I'm just not looking for any kind of response here, but I did receive an email from the Worker Center indicating that they're dissatisfied with the progress on labor negotiations at TCAT, and that they might be doing some kind of a rally or something.
There could be, but the negotiations are still underway, so.
Yeah, well,
that's all I'll say about that. It was discussed very briefly
All right.
yesterday.
Yeah, I don't know any details, but I just want to point out that was something that is in the email traffic.
Anything further? Courtney, Samantha, Frank, thanks for being with us this morning and bearing with us through a substantial agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Just a couple more items on there, and we're at the end of our allotted time, but we had a segment here for committee members' reports, and just note the budget adjustments for ITC, TC, and the Highway Department that are here for informational purposes. The only thing I was going to ask the committee, we've heard quite a large number of goals that were presented, and there's some themes that have developed. Is there anything specific that the committee wants to be looking at? I mean, we know that we want to see forward progress on the planning for the downtown campus and downtown facilities, and it appears we need to incorporate at least some of that planning in with the green facilities. We're also looking to see what we need to do to adjust the green facilities program moving forward. We know that the airport remains of interest to all the legislature and in increasing the number of flights and marketing and traffic. That
certainly would be a goal I'd want to see.
Yeah. And Highway Department, I don't have anything specific there, and I certainly don't want to throw any more to Rel than what he's accommodating right now. Norma's shaking her head. She knows what he's up against.
He's amazing. He gets so much done in spite of, there's a lot of challenges because something's always coming up, right? It's just the nature of the beast.
He'll be incorporated into the sheltering program pretty heavily, I guess, here, not too far along, in one form or another.
I just want a little shelter out at Kirk Road.
I'll say, actually, we had a shelter donated to the town of Newfield, and the Boy Scouts set it up. And the town also installed a pad for them and all those kinds of things. So, and it's used a lot now because we didn't have one right in the village. But I want to ask you one last thing on the committee. We met with Rel and Michael Stitley and other people on security of this office space, and a plan's going to be put forward. And we found that technology is pretty much unlimited to what we can do here. But so many of those things were discussed. I think a plan's coming forward from that. Katrina's working on that. So.
You're talking about the active threat training and the discussion results.
Yep. And this was after that. We had an additional meeting just on the technology.
Ms. Currie, could you please use your mic?
Oh, sorry, I said.
Thank you.
I just asked if this was related to the recent active threat training that we had, and yeah.
It was, and it was a continuation to understand what visual capabilities we have here, and what steps we could take to help. And I think there's quite a few.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I appreciate everybody's input today, and I'll report back to the full legislature more broadly on the committee goals, but I think we've kind of captured them. If anybody has something you want to expand upon, please let me know. Any further business this morning? If not, we'll stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Today.